Okay. Okay, good morning everybody and welcome to day 2 of DigitalEd 2022. So we had a wonderful day yesterday and today lots more to come. So we're going to kick off with Professor Phil Dawson from Deakin University from the CRADLE Centre. So we're delighted to have Phil here with us in Australia live this morning. So Professor Phil Dawson, he's Associate Director of CRADLE, the Centre for Research in Assessment and Digital Learning. And Phil has been researching assessment in higher education for some time, focusing on feedback and cheating, predominantly in the whole digital learning area. So his book, which was published back in 2021, looks at defending assessment security in a digital world and exploring how cheating is changing and what educators can do about it. So we are delighted to have Phil with us and looking forward to the keynote over the next hour. So handing over to Phil. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome. I'm getting some pretty crazy echo of my own voice, so I'm just gonna. No, I don't have a setting for that. Anyway, it is a joy to see you all virtually through all of this. It is about 8 minutes past 6 p.m. here in Melbourne, and I've got to be on stage at 8:15 doing a comedy show. So you can be sure I'm not going to run over time. Could I get my slides put up, please? Thank you very much. So yeah, I'm Phil. I'm from CRADLE at Deakin and I research cheating. When I talk about cheating, I always like to start off with a little bit of a disclaimer. This is just so we're all on the same page. So bear with me. Firstly, I'm a standards-based assessment person. Now, in this way, Australia and Ireland are pretty similar. There are some parts in the world where that's a controversial thing, but the idea that we might want to assess students against standards that we determine ahead of time, I think that's uncontroversial. I'm not looking to grade students on a curve. I'm not looking to throw away grades, though I do respect the sort of whole ungrading conversation that's happening at the moment. I'm interested in assessment. So I'm that. I support AFL, which is Assessment for Learning. There's a great Australian joke here about the Aussie rules football that I won't go into. But if you know that, you can guess my team based on the stripes there. And I support academic integrity, the sort of positive, educative, values-based mission. And I think cheating is a symptom of broader social problems. So if you think, oh, Phil, cheating's all about students as consumers, or cheating's all about neoliberalism, or some other big social issues, I'm not going to argue with you about that. Those just aren't the levers that I have access to. That's not the stuff I tend to focus on. But I agree, macro issues matter. I think universities, educational institutes have a responsibility to try to prevent and detect cheating. In Australia, to stay accredited, we have to do that. I'm not so sure about sort of your context. I believe QQI has requirements for you to do that as well, though I know them less. I receive research funding from edtech companies. Most notably, that includes Turnitin. If I were like a sports person or an F1 car driver, I'd have like a tiny Turnitin logo because they've supported the direct cost of some of my research, but never have any input on the stuff I say, nor do we make a profit from that research. And finally, the last bit of me coming clean is that my mum helped me contract cheat when I was in year 4. We had to do this poster on the similarities and differences of Australia and Canada. I could not do this thing. I struggled so hard. Later in life, I found out I have a thing called aphantasia where I have no mind's eye. I can't visualize anything. It's just blank there. I can't see my kids' faces or a duck or a square or a sunset or anything. It's just blankness in my mind. Which made doing that visual bit of assessment very difficult, so Mum did too much of it for me. I think apart from that, I'm in the clear. Okay, let's move on to the fun stuff. So, there are 3 things I'd like you to take from this presentation. The first one is that cheating is changing. So, cheating stayed kind of similar-ish for thousands of years since sort of it is mythologized to have started back in people trying to get through the civil service entry exam in China thousands of years ago. it's changed, and it's changing really rapidly. And I'll talk about that. The second thing is that we need to balance two things. So one of those I'm going to call academic integrity, and the other one assessment security. And we'll go into what those two things mean. And finally, that we need a layered approach to address cheating. And I'll go into what I mean by that and what that big wedge of cheese is all about. Okay, I thought I'd start with a bit of sort of the business of cheating. Here is the share price of Chegg over the sort of early part of the pandemic, a little bit before that, and up until relatively recently. On the left, we've got some research by Thomas Lancaster and a colleague, tracking this cheating site Chegg and the amount of demand for it. And on the right side, we've got the share price. And you'll see that as demand almost doubled, the share price almost doubled. So Chegg is a multi-billion-dollar cheating company. Let that sink in. If you want to compare to the other side of it, I believe Turnitin is a $1.7 billion text matching and whatever else company. So the big end of the market, the big end of all of this cheating stuff is commercialized cheating. That's where the money is. You don't make money from stopping cheating, you make money from helping cheating. Now, I understand it's sort of illegal in a lot of parts of the world. I think we're all in part of the world where it's sort of illegal. The legislation that we have doesn't do a lot against the big end of town, against the Cheggs. I really hope that we do start going after them, but so far, not much. So I raise all of this to say cheating is big business. And they maintain a pretty strong PR campaign. So if you look at some of the stuff that Chegg does, here is Chegg's teaching prize. So this is, I believe it's something huge, like $1 million, a prize for teachers, hosted in the UNESCO headquarters, backed by people like Gordon Brown, Joe Biden, Ban Ki-moon, and even Hugh Jackman. That was the only Australian I could find. And they're out there giving little video snippets supporting this teaching prize that is paid for, apparently, or at least sponsored by Chegg. So the big end of the cheating industry is really trying hard to legitimise itself by trying to, be seen as some sort of a force for good. I won't even go into, if you follow any of this, there's been a lot of hoo-ha about Course Hero lately. I won't go into that. I want to flag, though, I've talked about the rah-rah of big commercialised cheating, and we should be worried about that. But commercialised cheating is the tip of the iceberg. Most cheating is not commercialised cheating. So as we talk about the changing of cheating, there still is the perennial thing of getting your friends and family to do work for you. That is still what most of the problem is. Most of the problem is not paying for it. Now, I use that term contract cheating there. I want to just clarify what that means to me. Contract cheating is when you get someone else to do all or part of your work for you. That is a somewhat accepted definition. There's other terms for it as well. Rebecca Audrey, who's a PhD student in my research centre, in that paper on the top left, she proposes assignment outsourcing as maybe an alternative phrase. And I think that's interesting too. Whatever we want to call it, it's cheating, getting someone to do your work for you when you were meant to do it yourself. Something that doesn't get much attention is the use of specialist cheating technologies. So here we have a few things. On the left, we've got an exam cheating calculator. Now, it's illegal in Australia to sell that. However, it's sold a few kilometres from my home. And I've told the regulator that has criminal powers to prosecute these sorts of things. Nothing that I can see has been done so far. It'll be really interesting because that calculator lets you sort of text with people on a calculator during an exam. So you can text with someone who's outside of the exam, ask them questions, all of that. In the middle there, we've got photomath. Now, this raises an interesting one. So photomath is a tool that lets you take a photo of some maths and it will give you the step-by-step solution. You could write that down in your maths homework, Alternatively, you might be a professional engineer or something that just doesn't want to do that time-consuming part of their work. So there's this interesting thing where there are legitimate uses for some of these tools and there's cheating uses. The thing on the right there is very clearly marketed as a cheating tool, though. So that's Minorian Pro. It's a sort of hidden earpiece exam cheating tool. So you're meant to use this, have it in your ear, and then have someone coaching you what to write down on the exam. It's sort of like the romantic comedy trope of the person who's on a date and they've got someone coaching them about what to say. It's that, but for an exam. We don't pay a lot of attention to this stuff, and I see this as being somewhat of the future. Definitely something that is the future and is more and more in use is the rise of automated writing tools. So with these tools, you give them a prompt, a few sentences, and they will write as much for you as you want. They will use references. These tools will write text that is pretty good. It's not outstanding, it's not amazing, but it's pretty good. There's not a lot of research on this yet. The thing on the left side of the slide there is when some just academics in the US did something. This isn't like a peer-reviewed study, but it's just some people who went and got some AI tools online to make some assignments and then got some people to mark those assignments. And you'll see the grades for, there's an extra step. They also got some people to write some assignments. The bluer colour there is the grades that the human written assignments got, and the purpley pinky colour is the grades that the AI written assignments got. The scariest part of this is that most of the time, completely AI written assignments were able to score passing grades. That's really concerning for me. I don't know if you've read, there was an article in The Guardian a little while back that was completely written by the GPT-3 tool. Well, they said it was completely written by GPT-3. They backtracked that a little bit. But it was substantively written by an AI, and it's a good read. I know a professional copywriter who uses these tools in his job, and he said that himself and his peers, their daily work has changed a lot. They used to just write. Now what they do is they use AI tools, get them to produce text that they want, and then a human will massage the text output. We as educators need to have a good conversation about what we think of these tools and when we are happy to let students use them, because in some senses, these are now authentic tools of text production. It's what happens. It's similar to the old, you won't carry a calculator around in your pocket every day argument. Well, I was told that, but I do now. Will we have access to these tools to write our text for us in the future? On the right there is the only article I've been able to find that actually looks at these tools. And it's got some great sort of screenshots of the interfaces and the sort of text that they produce if you want to follow this up. Hacking and cheating in online exams. So some institutions are using online exams, some are using remote proctoring. So those are the systems that monitor you while you undertake an exam. These systems allow us to try to replicate test conditions in an online exam. And that's something that we may want to do in some contexts. Certainly during the pandemic, there was a great rise in the use of these tools. The unfortunate thing is that people online claim to be able to hack these exams. That's troubling for me that they're able to do that. I've asked several remote proctored exams providers if they'll let me try to see if I can cheat in it and then publish a study about doing that. And perhaps understandably, none of them have been keen on that. So we sadly sort of have to trust that these things are to some extent effective at stopping cheating. The jury's out at whether or not they exactly detect cheating. If you cheat, will it catch you? But there does seem to be good evidence that they will deter cheating. So I'm willing to say that these things might have a role in securing online assessment. But I'd love to see some robust evidence of if people can cheat in them like they claim. The grab I've got there is from a security researcher who's running a virtual machine. So sort of like how you used to run Windows in a window on a Mac, so you could run some Windows-only software on it. Well, Riley Chase did that with a remote proctored exams tool while using a different operating system, which allowed him to run the exam and run other software at the same time, which you're supposed to not be able to do. Okay, so I've done the big sort of scare thing about cheating, changing and all that. I think cheating and e-cheating, if we want to sort of label this technologised cheating, is different for a few reasons. Firstly, it doesn't require any cleverness or hard work on the part of students. There used to be this old sort of folk wisdom that, oh, if only the students tried so hard on their work as they did on cheating, then they'd just do really good on their work. I don't think that was ever much of an argument. And I'm an assessment and standards person, so I don't care how hard they try on the cheating. I want to know, can they do the things we want them to be able to do? But definitely cheating now doesn't require any special efforts or talent. It can be packaged up, it can be shared, it can be bought with a credit card, it can be anonymous. It is pushed to students, not just pulled. To delve into that a bit, there's this idea sometimes that a student thinks they want to cheat and then Googles, how do I cheat, or something like that. It's not necessarily the way that it goes. You can be Googling for advice on referencing and get the first half dozen web hits be companies that want you to cheat, that want to market cheating to you. You can be tweeting about the difficulties you're having in your assignments and get people offer to do those assignments for you. If you want a good paper on that, there's one by Alexander Amagud where he tweeted certain keywords like I hate statistics or writing or paper due, different keywords, and found so many bots are out there just wanting to push cheating services to you. So it's not just pull, it's also push. As I said, cheating rate higher on a legitimate web search than the actual help that you're after. It evolves at the pace of technology. So we are seeing so many new types of cheating come through every year now, whereas previously it was much, much slower, and it's never more than a web search away. So that's sort of my first argument here, that cheating is changing, and it's changing fast. The second thing that I want to talk to you about is balancing academic integrity and assessment security. So academic integrity is a positive, educative and values-based mission. It's about equipping students so that they have the capability to do the right thing, that they want to do the right thing, that they value doing the right thing, that acting with integrity and ethics in their scholarship is something that they will do, even if they're not being watched. Assessment security, on the other hand, is more adversarial. It can be punitive. It is evidence-based in that it's about how do we know for sure that our approaches actually do stop cheating or detect it or deter it. Now, the debate around cheating has become really polarised of late. And I want to put to you that these two things should be in tension with each other, but it's not a dichotomy. I'd love it if you can join me in this sort of difficult middle ground where we think, yes, it's important to develop students' capabilities around academic integrity, but we can't just have some sort of positive blind trust, because at the end of the day, we assess students, we say that they are capable of certain things, and we need to know that it was them doing those things in particular conditions. So let's delve into these a bit more. Academic integrity, your best source on it is the International Centre for Academic Integrity. They have a great website. I believe it's academicintegrity.org. And on that site, they talk about these fundamental values of academic integrity: honesty, trust, fairness, respect, responsibility, and courage. These are valuable things to develop in students, even if they had nothing to do with cheating. I would love it if we graduated students with these values. However, we also know that these values are protective against cheating. So that's a big plus. And we know that sort of academic integrity missteps, so not having these values and doing the wrong thing at university as a result, can be predictive in some contexts of professional integrity missteps. So it's valuable for our students' future lives that they develop these values. Now, we've got to balance that against the measures we take to harden assessment against attempts to cheat, this sort of assessment security mission. So our attempts to detect and evidence attempts to cheat, as well as measures to make cheating more difficult. So where academic integrity, we might be doing things like talking with students about the value of proper scholarship. We might be developing their capabilities to reference. We might be getting students to sign on to an honour code that says, I value integrity and I know what it means, those sorts of things. Where academic integrity is about that, assessment security is about monitoring if students are doing the right thing. Actually, perhaps surveilling them, looking at their work. The use of tools like text matching tools is assessment security. So it's really important we disentangle these two concepts. We can't bundle all this kind of punitive stuff underneath the positive mission of academic integrity. So that's my big point here, that addressing cheating requires us to balance those two things: the trusting, educative, proactive mission of academic integrity and the detecting, the punitive, the proactive or reactive mission of assessment security. And I say proactive or reactive there because sometimes we're being proactive in trying to, say, detect cheating. We might use text matching tools, we might use remote proctoring, we might use an invigilator in an exam, those sorts of things. Sometimes we're reactive. Sometimes we find out that there's been a lot of cheating in a particular context. We hear rumours from a student, or a student comes to us, and then we have to go out there and respond to something that's kind of in progress. We need to attend to both sides of this. It's crime prevention and policing or surveillance. I really don't think the argument that we've just got to trust the students actually holds up, because at the end of the day, very little evidence that it works, just that blind faith approach. And we have a sort of contract with society that the people we graduate can do the things we say they can do. Similarly, we can't just monitor students, because do we really want to graduate students who only didn't cheat because they were being watched? I don't think so. Okay, that's my first two. Number three, that we need a layered approach to address cheating. And we'll talk about the cheese. Here is the cheese. So, in my view, the most important takeaway from the pandemic about how we're going to deal with cheating doesn't actually come from our experiences there. It comes from the experience dealing with the pandemic. So on the left there, you've got a sort of classic Swiss cheese model. These are common in other contexts as well. This one's about respiratory virus pandemic defense. It's the argument that on their own, masks will not stop the coronavirus, and on their own, vaccines will not stop it, nor will social distancing, nor will staying home when you get sick, etc. But enough of these layers can sort of counteract the holes in each other, and we do an okay job. So we don't have any one intervention that's perfect, but we have several imperfect interventions that do a reasonable job. And on the right there, we've got an attempt to sort of apply that similar sort of thinking to the problem of cheating. And this is not mine, this is Rundle, Curtis and Claire. And I think that's the way we want to start thinking about cheating. Not looking for a perfect intervention that's going to stop all cheating, because it does not exist. But looking at layering several different types of interventions together to do a good enough job. But a slight deviation before we go into the layers. If the thing that you're looking at is not valid and reliable assessment of learning, then it's not worth securing. You have other problems to deal with before you get onto the cheating problem. What do we mean by that? So reliability, We mean the extent to which it assesses consistently. If you've got multiple people assessing, the extent to which they would give the same piece of work similar sorts of grades. The extent to which across multiple cohorts, the same standard is applied. When we're talking validity, a really simplified version is, the extent to which we're assessing what we think we're assessing. We're assessing the outcomes that we're meant to be assessing, that we actually have those standards. Reliability and validity need to be addressed before we go to the problem of cheating. It's not worth it to try and secure assessment that's not assessing what it's supposed to assess. So we really need to think about that. Anyway, that's my diversion. Here's the cheese. No layer of Swiss cheese is perfect, yes, but some of them are all holes. Now, I'm going to say some stuff here that you might find contentious. I don't know. Before I say the stuff, I love authentic and individualized assessment. I think it's great. It's just not an effective approach to deter cheating or to address cheating. So the first one there is banning essays. To be clear, these are things I do not think are a great solution. I've had people walk away from this talk thinking, I want you to do these things. These are not perfect solutions. Banning essays is a weird one. There was an article in Times Higher Ed a little while back that said to stop essay mills, we should stop using essays, which I guess is technically correct, but it's not going to stop the broader problem of contract cheating. Contract cheating sites can produce whatever sort of assessed work you want them to produce. And we know that from work on, say, authentic assessment there. The reference I've got there, they found that contract cheating sites were producing a broad manner of authentic assessment tasks. The use of authentic assessment on its own is not going to make it harder to contract cheat. It just won't. You can get people to produce whatever sort of work you want them to produce. The use of short turnaround times, similarly, does not stop cheating. So I know during the pandemic there was a bit of use of take-home exams. So, we give you an exam. We can't have it in an exam hall, so you can just do it, but you've got to do it within a few hours. We're not going to watch you while you do it. You've got to do it in a few hours, or you've got to do it in a day. And the rationale there was that it will stop cheating in some way. It kind of doesn't. The article there, the reference I've got, is about the market capacity and the turnaround time in contract cheating. And it is such that short turnaround times just won't stop cheating. You can get work turned around really quickly. These are people who are waiting to do work for you. There's more of them wanting to do work than there are students wanting work done. And they're just better. They're just quicker. They're professionals. If you want a sort of tell-all book on how they do it, my favourite in that genre is by Delusion with a Z. It's available on the Amazon store for just a few dollars. And it goes into the professional practices of one contract cheating writer, and it's packaged as a book to help students write assignments better. And gee, they know how to write quickly. We don't. Individualized assessment tasks, they're not going to stop cheating. People who recommend this as a way to stop contract cheating, I think sometimes haven't quite got their head around the fact that these are bespoke assignments that get written for students. This isn't reuse. This is brand new things. So your individualized assessment task can be brand new written. Yeah, it might stop someone reusing last year's assignment, but that's not where we're at right now in the cheating debate. If you think that's the big problem, you're not aware of sort of the breadth of contract cheating prevalence. There's various studies on contract cheating prevalence, a meta-analysis, so sort of a synthesis of many, many studies, found about sort of 15, 16% of students admitting to contract cheating. Australian studies have ranged from about 3% to about 10%, with the 10% being probably the more trustworthy end of things. This is probably one of our big problems that we've got at the moment to deal with. And they'll do an individualized task for you. And finally, the most dangerous of all, people claiming that they've figured it out, that they've got a cheat-proof task. I find this really dangerous thinking because no task is cheat-proof. And once you start thinking something is, you kind of have your blinkers on and you kind of don't want that world to be shattered. I get in lots of arguments on Twitter with people who think they found the cheat-proof task. They just haven't. Okay, now I said authentic assessment was not the way to go, but what about this? What about authentic restrictions? Bear with me on this one. On the right there, we've got a final exam in an engineering subject at the University of New South Wales. So this is David Kellerman. He's an engineering academic there. He sets up the Microsoft Teams channel for students to talk to each other on while they do the exam. And he finds that they do talk to each other about what they're doing in the exam. But the questions are, where did we talk about this in class? What lecture? How do I do this? How do I do that? It doesn't get to the point of doing the work for each other. Now, this is authentic in the sense that it's the actual way professional engineers practice. I never trained to be an engineer myself, but I did train as a computer scientist. And I can tell you that when you're writing code, you don't sit down pen and paper as I did when I was doing it. You don't sit on a computer that's disconnected from the internet. You have access to many different tools. I'm pitching that we might want to think about the restrictions that we set on assessment and ask ourselves if those restrictions are authentic. So what would someone doing this task in the professional context have access to, and what wouldn't they have access to? Anything we say they don't have access to is a restriction. When we set restrictions, we need to enforce those restrictions, because if we don't, then some students are going to breach them, some students aren't, and we have a major validity problem, because the assessor's judgments for some students are not based on what they're supposed to have access to. They're based on, the tools the students wrongly had access to. So with restrictions, we need to set as few of those as possible. Perhaps paradoxically, that might sound weird, because whatever restrictions we set, we need to enforce. So setting authentic restrictions, so like very few, reduces what in cybersecurity they call the attack surface, the sort of area that we need to defend. We need to stop people from doing fewer things. You might see this, say, in the choice between an open book or a closed book exam. If you set a closed book exam, you need to make sure no one has access to notes, etc. In an online exams context, I'm not sure that's possible. Go online, find out how people bring notes into even remote proctored online exams. As I said, I don't have any peer-reviewed literature to back this up because they won't let me, but I'm pretty sure we can all come up with ways to sneak notes into a remote proctored exam. This suggests that the sort of closed book nature is not being enforced effectively, thereby hurting the validity. So think about the tasks that you set and think about the restrictions that you set and ask yourself, am I actually able to enforce these restrictions? And are these authentic restrictions? Now, there's arguments both ways for different times. So if we are training someone to be a pilot, we want them to be able to fly the aeroplane when the instruments work, and we want them to be able to fly the aeroplane when the instruments fail. We probably would assess them more times when the instruments are working, because the instrument's failure is a very important edge case. But we want a mix of assessments where they have access to all the tools sometimes and not all the tools sometimes. Remote proctoring. Now, I touched on this before. I think it can be an effective layer, but it has pros and cons. I talked about sort of the evidence around proctoring probably deterring cheating, and there's claims that it's effective or ineffective at detecting cheating. With the deterring, I'll just put a flag on that. There's at least a dozen studies that I'm aware of that take the form of, we give students an exam and it's either a remote proctored exam or an unproctored online exam. And the students in the remote proctored exam do worse than the students in the unproctored exam. And that is interpreted as evidence that proctoring stops cheating, because the grades were inflated because of cheating in the unproctored online exam. There's other potential explanations. There's some evidence that students with trait test anxiety do worse in remote proctored exams, so it could be a sort of anxiety effect there. But I'm willing to go along with the sort of broad consensus. No, consensus is the wrong word. There's no consensus. The broad feeling there that remote proctoring probably deters cheating. I don't know if it detects cheating well. That's still not out there in the peer-reviewed literature. There are on the right a few concerns that are mentioned. Concerns about privacy, surveillance, anxiety, distrust, discrimination, and the continuation of outmoded assessment practices. I think those are legitimate concerns. I think this is hard ethical reasoning that we have to do. This isn't some of our usual sort of pedagogical reasoning, this is ethical reasoning. And if you follow sort of the link there, and I think these slides will be shared, I go into how the perspectives that you take on the problem kind of shapes what you might think about it. We should also ask students what they think they would be more or less likely to cheat on. This is a great paper here, a figure that I generated from data in a paper by Tracy Brettag and colleagues, where they asked students, what sorts of tasks do you think students would be more or less likely to contract cheat on? And you'll see reflection is really small and tasks with a short turnaround time is really big, which goes back to that thing I said before about don't use short turnaround time to stop cheating. Reflection is interesting because people lie in reflection a lot. My favourite paper on reflective tasks is called They Liked It When You Said That You Cried, because, you know, we do embellish. We do say stuff that, you know, might not be entirely true in those reflective tasks, and we know that students do. Vivas, not sure the pronunciation where you are an interesting one as well. Getting students in and talking with them about their work is standard practice in some disciplines. When I taught computer science, we would sit down with students and get them to step us through their code. Now, that sort of thing can be really effective in understanding if the student actually did the work themselves. Also seems like students say they're less likely to contract cheat on it. We've done one study that's unpublished where we got a lot of contract cheated work, we paid students to become familiar with it, and then we got them to talk to us about either an assignment they had done themselves or an assignment that we'd paid for. Every single time across several tutors that we worked with, the tutors were able to tell which students were using cheated work and which students weren't. It's one of those too good to be true study results though, so we get to publish. We want to replicate that one. Okay, sorry, just had a little bit of lag there. An important thing to flag is that many approaches to dealing with cheating are beyond individuals. So we need sectoral, systemic, institutional, departmental, whatever level change efforts. You know, countering the persuasion that's put forward by the cheating purveyors with education campaigns is something that we've got to work together on. All of us can talk with our students. All of us have that responsibility to talk in class about integrity, but we can also work together on that. There's site blocking, so working as an institution to block access to cheating sites, ideally with referral, so you don't just get a terrible firewall page, you get referral to the support services. Deplatforming cheating, and I see there is some debate right now around sort of payment processors like Visa and MasterCard and PayPal and other intermediaries like Google Ads and all that in blocking access to their platforms for cheating services. I think that's a really good step forward. Improving detection rates through training, staffing and technology. My centre has bought more contract cheating assignments than anyone else in the world, I think. And gee, we found that if you ask people to detect contract cheating, they can often detect it. So actually just ask people to, but if you train them, they can detect it even better. And the use of specialist technologies as well. And finally, amnesties or even just ways for students to come forward and say, hey, I cheated. Can you help me? Can you help me make it right. And that might mean there's still punishment, but providing students with a way out that has some dignity to it and is a bit of a learning moment rather than just a pure moment of punishment. Making it someone's job. This is key. It's something that Kath Ellis from the University of New South Wales talks about, because we know most cheating never gets to the point of having been detected and proven. We ignore so much information about cheating. The most cheating not getting to the point of being detected and proven. There was an article by some journalists in the UK a few years back. You remember that 15% figure that I gave? Well, they thought, I wonder if 15% of students get caught at UK universities for contract cheating. So they asked all the universities, what proportion of cheating do you catch? Like, what proportion of students do you see? And then they did some calculations based on the 15 point something percent figure and found that less than 1% of the likely prevalent cheating cases ever got taken through the disciplinary procedures at UK universities. This is really troubling. So we know that we've got a big problem that is kind of invisible to us. Needs to be someone's job. We know that, say, with contract cheating, the main reasons why it doesn't get taken through is that because it's seen as too much work or it's seen as being too hard to prove. So we need there to be support services. We need there to be people whose job it is to follow up on those suspected cheating cases. And my final big push is to go programmatic or go home. When I say programmatic, you might have heard of programmatic assessment, which is this idea that we might look across a program of study, a degree course or whatever other course someone's doing, and find the moments of assessment and how they connect with each other. When we do this, we should think about which of those moments of assessment are key summative moments that really tell us if the student can do the things we say they can do when they graduate. Find those moments and really secure those. Maybe use some of the more resource-intensive approaches like Vivas. People always say, oh, I couldn't do that. It takes too much time to talk to students about their work. We don't have to do it for every task. We might want to do it for some tasks. Or think about other really secure approaches to assessment for your context, for your discipline. Secure those key moments with some of the more high security approaches and just don't care as much about the other moments. Focus on developing students so they have that academic integrity capability in the other moments. The alternatives, trying to secure everything, that's just not going to happen. We're just going to do a poorer job because our resourcing is spread so thin. So when we think about this, we want to go programmatic. All right, those are my 3 big points. Firstly, that cheating's changing. Stayed similar for hundreds, maybe thousands of years, and then changing really rapidly now. That we need to balance the positive academic integrity mission and the more adversarial assessment security mission, and that we need to think at a different unit of analysis. So not focusing zoomed in on one assessment task and getting that to be perfect, but thinking about layered approaches, thinking about assessing across a whole program of study and thinking about cheating at that programmatic level. So zooming out on our unit of analysis. That's me. So I'll get those slides taken down now, thanks, and I'd love to have a chat.
Can you see me? Can I see him?
Oh, I can't see anyone but myself. Oh, I can see you now.
No. Can the 2 of us be on the screen together so people can see? Oh yeah, great. Thanks a million. Thanks, Phil. Got some scary stories you're sharing, but I suppose we're not, we're all familiar with what's happening across higher ed, so I suppose it's not that frightening, but there's lots of discussion going on there in the chat. I see some comments there from colleagues in Donegal, Michael Carey, and also from Perry Share in Sligo, in our Sligo campus of the ATU. No, I can't see it. Maybe Kevin, can you call it out there? There's a couple of really good comments, and maybe there's some questions. Is there further questions? Pull it down. I suppose one question I have, Phil, that you raised, and it was very interesting. You talked about, restrictions. An authentic assessment is great, but it doesn't help stop cheating. Authentic restrictions might. And then, it was interesting the example you used about the pilot and using the mix of assessments. Is there other examples, perhaps from your own university in Deakin? Just take a particular discipline, perhaps where they've got it right, perhaps, or they've got the mix right, and perhaps what is that mix that they're using on a particular programme in your university? Just curious if you have a case example to share.
Yeah, so I know medicine is always the one that I tend to go to, because medicine tends to have it right with programmatic assessment first. So, and part of that's because they're often resourced better than the rest of us are. So in medicine, it's common to have some, hands-on skills where people are actually being observed by someone in real life doing a skill. So they have that. But they've also got a whole bunch of time where students are out in a hospital or out in practice doing things, and we don't have sort of the watchful eye over them the whole time. But we have, people out there sort of monitoring them, keeping some distance. We've got some use of exams in medicine, and those tend to be really valid, reliable exams where the effort has really been put in to make sure that the outcomes we need to assess are the outcomes that are being assessed, that a student can't sort of skim through being really good at one thing and really bad at another thing. You can't get through that in a medicine course. So those sort of validity and grade calculation things are there. I think it's just the balance of many different types of assessment that are used to form a judgment about what the student's capable of. And yeah, you would be able to cheat at some of them, but you're not going to be able to cheat at all of them. And all of them is what the judgment about you is based on.
Good point. There's some questions here on the floor as well. I know you can't see them, but we have Sheila McNeil, who's one of our keynotes as well this week. Sheila's from the UK, the higher education system in the UK. Sheila, did you?
Yeah, so I don't know if Phil can hear me, but it was a great presentation. I just wanted to
just check, can he hear you? Can he hear? Can you hear Phil?
No, you might.
Do you know if you just step real closer to the mic? Yeah.
Yeah.
There's an issue with echo in this room that we're not able to use a roving mic. So Sheila's just going to step forward a little bit closer. This mic is working, is it?
Okay, this one. Or is it that one?
Yeah.
All right. So thanks, Phil. Great presentation. I just wanted to go back to the point you made about making it someone's job to look at cheating. And I wanted to ask, whose job should it be? Because I think that's a huge question about who was doing that, and that would impact on balance in terms of where they sat within an institution. So I'm just interested in your thoughts about whose job it should be to do that.
Oh, that's a great question. And I got crazy echo. Yep, we fixed that. All right. Ideally, it's a specialist job that is someone who has expertise in this particular area, and there are those sorts of people out there now. They're developing. The division between the individual teacher, the lecturer, the tutor, whoever, and the sort of professional staff support role on that is an interesting one. We find in Australian universities, and it could be different in sort of UK, Ireland, so over here we find that the academic gets that sort of hunch and identifies a case, but they hand it over to someone who's sort of in that professional staff investigation role after they've sort of had that hunch. Now, there is also, so these are for sort of capital C cheating things. There's also a bit of a move in the other direction to, on the really minor things, say you did poor referencing practice in your first assignment, to remove those cases from the disciplinary procedures and have that be purely handled by the educator as an educative intervention. So I've often talked about the big, egregious cheating stuff. And for that, we do need robust procedures, and we need professional people with expertise in investigating it, because building a case that someone has got someone else to do their work for them is a really hard thing to do. But when it comes to hey, you don't know how it works here. Let's sit down. I'll show you how to act with integrity and within what we think integrity means. I think that's really an academic's job.
Yeah, something that we've been looking at in our own university here, Phil, is we have an academic integrity work group in place, and one of, I suppose, the recommendations that came through was to recruit and put in place an academic integrity officer for our university. Would that be something you would support, or maybe is that something that exists within your own university?
Yeah, look, definitely I would support that. I think that's an excellent idea. We have pretty large teams at our university. So we're a largest institution. It's always hard to know what counts as large. We've got 70,000 students. So we have sort of a central team of, I think it'd be about half a dozen people. We've got teams in different faculties. Some departments have their own person. I think it's something that we resource quite a lot at our university, and several Australian universities do that as well. I think our accreditation is very much at risk if we don't pay this proper attention. We've got a regulator who is very much onto this. They know the size and scope of the problem. They need to see that we're doing something about it and that it's effective.
Great. Thanks, Phil. Any more questions from the floor here? We have a few more. Sean Daffy?
Yeah.
Can they?
Hi, Phil, can you hear me from here?
Can you hear him? Yeah, great.
Super. I've so many questions, but I'll restrict it to two. One is there any study or information on the motivations of cheaters? And you were getting at it towards it there on one slide with the context they're more likely to cheat, but the factors that will make someone cheat or make them consider cheating. And number two, in relation to AI, which there was an article about that in the NRB as well just recently, and it's really quite frightening. Do you think that's going to be I don't know, is there any information of the growth of that? Or have we any indicator of what kind of a rough beast is slouching towards us in relation to the AI cheating area as opposed to the contract side,
Oh, great questions. Okay, so the second one was on AI. The first one was on sort of what motivates and all of that. There is research on what motivates people. It's not something I tend to spend a lot of time on because I've got to say a lot of it's kind of the things that you and I would find if we sat down and did a brainstorming session about what motivates people to cheat. It's a belief that I'll get away with it. It's sort of not seeing those penalties as being there. It's desperation. It's a desire to, live up to sort of parental pressure, societal pressure, etc. I mean, I guarantee you could come up with a context or a sad story and say, Phil, if you found yourself in this situation, would you cheat? And I would say yes. I would. There are sad scenarios I could see myself in where I would cheat. There's also work on sort of individual personality differences. Like your dark triad traits that are in psychology research, and those are predictive of cheating. I'd really point to Guy Curtis. He's a great researcher who's done some good stuff on that. He's also published a good paper recently, which we're getting him to do a seminar on for our centre about why students don't cheat. Because I think that's also an interesting question. Apparently, it's not just the inverse of why students cheat. Now, your second question was on AI and where that's all going. The field of AI has a whole bunch of different goals. One of those is the development of high-level machine intelligence, HLMI. And there was an interesting survey done of AI experts a few years back that said, at what point in time is this inevitable? How far away is it inevitable? And it's certainly within my lifetime, the bulk, I think it was about 90% of the AI researchers thought it is inevitable that we get to that high-level machine intelligence that can do a professional's job as well as a professional can. I've got references on this in my book. I've got a chapter on AI and sort of what it poses. I think that the big question then for us is what's the role of assessment? What do students still need to be able to do? How do we design tasks? I like to view it through the lens of cognitive offloading, which is when you use some sort of technology to reduce the mental burden of a task. Now, people have been concerned about cognitive offloading for ages. You go back to Socrates, who is supposed to have said, you know, with this whole writing thing, people are going to appear as if they know things, but they really don't know things. They just read it. So it goes all the way back to there, through to the calculator sort of panic. And I wonder if we're having another version of that and we'll have a radically different society in 30 years' time that's okay with people using AI in their assessed work, because we'll want to see the uniquely human things, whatever those are.
Okay, and there's a couple of comments. Is there more questions from the floor here? We're okay. There's a couple of comments coming in online. I wonder, does anyone have a specific question they would like to ask? Is there questions there, Kevin?
A few in the chat, yeah.
Okay.
Just,
Oh, Jessica's screen has crashed. Kevin, can you
Yeah, just generally a lot of discussion about different examples and so on. Just in general, Phil, if you could maybe elaborate a little bit on the different layers that you talked about. So, like, some of them obviously aren't easy to implement, but they may take time and so on, especially when it comes to programmatic things. But could you give us some examples, maybe within your own institution, what you've done in terms of those layers of trying to address cheating with the different layers, if that makes sense?
Yeah, great question. All right, so I think it's worthwhile to split them off into maybe the academic integrity layers and the assessment security layers. On the academic integrity side of things, you know, we do a thing that all Australian unis seem to do now, which is get students to complete a mandatory academic integrity module at the start of their studies. These modules basically educate students about what academic integrity is, what the standards and expectations are of ethical scholarship at university. They provide some scenarios to students to get them to think, you know, what would I do here? Those sorts of things. So that's mandatory. You can't continue with your studies if you don't do that. So we've got that. We've got sort of procedures in place to catch those early moments where someone has an academic integrity misstep and turn those into educative moments. So, you know, that catching the poor referencing or those sorts of things and really talking with students. We have a process of integrating academic integrity into the curriculum. So not just that module that sits on its own over here, but making sure that throughout each course, each degree, there are specific units or subjects or modules that students take that are about something. They're not about academic integrity, but that within those units, students experience academic integrity and are taught about it in a way that really applies to their discipline. We have great partnerships with our student association, and they run great educative campaigns as well and work with students and provide advocacy on the part of students around academic integrity. So they do things like they have a week about contract cheating, where it's, you know, them on campus and in the online campus really pushing and educating. And these are, our student association employs several full-time staff around academic integrity and working with students on that. So that's sort of some of the academic integrity side of things. On the assessment security side of things, we've got some traditional things. So when you have an exam hall exam, that's assessment security. So we have some of those. I've got to say, I think across the institution, we've gone from having hundreds of exams to having tens of exams now. So we've really cut those back. The evidence in support of exams as a way to stop cheating is mixed. I wouldn't have it as the only approach, but it's useful to have in some contexts. And certainly some of our regulators and professional bodies that accredit our degrees want us to have exams. So we have exams. We have interactive oral assessment. So talking with students about their work, used in a really targeted way. So not everywhere, but just some of the time. There's some work going on around sort of do we do random audits of student work? So rather than securing every task every time, do we just do sometimes pick some random tasks and random students' work and investigate those ones in a pretty serious way to see, are we sure that cheating hasn't occurred here? That's an interesting one because the ethics of it, there's a lot of debate about if it's okay for some people to get randomly investigated. It happens in the tax system, and it seems to be pretty effective there, but we're still having our arguments. Another approach that we use is text matching software. We use Turnitin, but there are others. That stuff still matters, but I think in 2022, if you're being caught by Turnitin for text matching, it's really you not understanding how the game works. It's really, you shouldn't have got caught doing that. So that's as much a failure of us in educating you about good scholarship as it is a problem with you copying and pasting. But we do that. We use a tool called Authorship Investigate, which is from Turnitin. It's a stylometric tool. It looks at student work and compares it to the student's other work to see, did the same person write this work? We've done a study on that. We found that it did significantly increase markers' ability to detect contract cheating, but that was a pilot study in an early version of the tool. We haven't done a proper study with the latest version, but we think it is a way that we can help do that assessment security, detection of contract cheating thing. Oh gosh, I could go on, but I think I've probably said enough here. But you can see how all of those you could come up with but Phil, that's not perfect. Here's a way you can get around it. You get around the Authorship Investigate software by paying the same contract cheating writer to write your work every time, and there would be no stylistic drift. But the layers together, we think, do a pretty good job. And all of that's supported by really robust investigation processes and professional staff who really know this stuff in depth. They're quite difficult to find, those people. So if you do get a good one, really hold on to them.
Great. Thanks very much, Phil. Just your point that you made there on the education piece, spending quite a bit of time with students and educating them about academic integrity. We've been lucky actually, and I'm glad Mark Lynn is here with us. You might be familiar, they developed an academic integrity kind of education hub as part of a European project, and we were very lucky to get access to that here in Galway, and it's certainly a tool that we're using with our staff to, I suppose, educate our colleagues about academic integrity and how to manage our students and educate them, because the education and awareness piece is key. Now, we have it embedded, I suppose, we have the whole academic integrity piece linked into a first year skills module that we roll out called, it was Learning and Innovation Skills, and it's now called Academic and Professional Development Skills. But I do wonder, is that enough, Phil? We're suppose we're planting the seeds in first year, but there's so much more to do every year with the students in relation to I suppose managing and educating on awareness of academic integrity. So we might follow up again at another session to look at some of those tactics or those strategies. You've explained some really good ideas there, and just the assessment mix. I think there's another seminar in it in itself. We might look at that for another day, looking at the whole life cycle from first year down to final year, and the mix that some of those cases that you've talked about from your own university are very interesting. But anyways, is there any questions, any further questions from anybody? Is there any more comments there? Are there more commentary, Kevin?
Yeah, a lot of discussion going on in the chat. So
lots of debate going on there, Phil.
They like the guitar as the background.
And they like your guitar.
Thank you. There's two. There's a nice Australian one, which is, I can't do this. When the camera's flipped, I can't figure out what's left and right. Anyway, a nice Australian one and a Gibson SG, if anyone's guitar watching at home.
Good.
We might just ask one last question.
Oh, one last question. Sorry.
How useful is it to have a really open and frank discussion with students about all this, rather than just say no approach?
Yeah, thank you so much. I love this question. So when I was a kid, my parents didn't do the say no to drugs thing. We had this book and it described what all the drugs did. And it didn't just say the bad things about the drugs, it said the good things about the drugs. And I don't know, I've never done any illicit drugs. Maybe that worked well for me. But I do think there's a real benefit in moving beyond the say no to drugs approach to all of this, to that frank conversation. And when you're having that frank conversation, there's some scary stuff. So I mentioned earlier that we've bought more of these contract cheating assignments than anyone else. We've also paid markers to mark them. We've had these like double, triple, quadruple marked by people from our institution. Most of them fail. Most of the assignments we buy fail. So that's something we want to tell students. Another really scary finding is that some of these commercial cheating providers blackmail students. So there's some great work by John York and colleagues that found that students are getting blackmailed. So you get the assignment, you submit it, you pass, fantastic, but then you get approached by the cheating provider and they say, oh, give us more money or we will tell your institution. And they will be able to find out your institution. Students often think they're being, super sneaky and stealthy, but it's actually not that hard. A lot of the times that we detect contract cheating, it's because the cheating providers aren't getting paid. So they just Google the name of the assessment task, they find it in the online handbook, and they email the assignment to the university, and we match it and we know whose thing it is. So this sort of thing does happen. And yeah, we need that serious, frank conversation. And I think in that conversation, we want to frame academic integrity as a valuable thing for, their life as a student, but as training and practice and development for their life as a professional. And if we can contextualize it within the sort of professional integrity conversations that happen within our disciplines. So yeah, 100% agree with you about those conversations. And that is the responsibility of every single one of us to have those conversations. We can't just chuck that into the module. The module does enough work. We need to have these frank conversations too.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Phil. I know you have another appointment. You're due to be going on stage. Is that right?
Yes, I've got to jump into Melbourne and do some comedy.
Yeah, that's great. God, you've an interesting life, I must say. So listen, thanks very much for being with us today. We're delighted to have had you here, and you've just planted some seeds, and it's great. We've just become a new university, Phil. I don't know if you're aware of that. We're quite a large group of 8 campuses in the west and northwest of Ireland. So we've been renamed recently Atlantic Technological University. So we're looking forward to having you back with us, and maybe sometime you might make it to Ireland.
Oh, I would love that. That would be fantastic to come over and see Ireland and meet people, because I think some of this stuff is great to do in person. But it's been a joy, and I really hope that some of these ideas help, and wish you all the best on your academic integrity journey.
Take care and good luck with the show.
Thank you.